Welcome back. You're watching 101. We're speaking with actress, writer, and renowned cook, Madhur Jaffrey. Your life changed as you moved continents, basically. At 19, you ended up on scholarship to the prestigious Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, RADA, as a young Indian girl, basically doing something your contemporaries never really did, going to performing arts.
I did a lot of things that nobody had done before.
How did your parents react? The idea?
My father, until his sort of very end of his life, he kept saying, it's a hobby, it's a hobby. I remember there was a great occasion when I was being awarded a prize by the President of India, who happened to be Zakir Hussain, and who was a great friend of my father's. And he was giving some kind of award, and my father was there, and the president was there, and my father said, it's a hobby. He was telling him, this is a hobby. So he never thought of it as a profession, ever. But he was happy that I was doing it, and that was one of the advantages of being the fifth child. The other four were doing the things that he was happy with. So he was taking a chance on me and he encouraged me. He put me on the ship, the P&O liner that took me to England. He was quite happy that this odd girl is going to do odd things. I'm going to enjoy her doing these odd things, and he just let me go.
How well prepared or how well equipped were you for life in a big Western city after the kind of upbringing, close family environment you shared with your family in India?
Well, strangely enough, totally. And that is why, the reason is the movies I'd watched, the books I'd read, the comics I'd read, the magazines I'd read. You see, Indians of that period were totally prepared for the West. I don't know what the West is ever prepared to come to India, but we were ready. We had read Hardy, you start with Chaucer. I'd gone to college, and my English was my subject, so you start with the early writings like Chaucer, and you come down to modern times. We knew Shakespeare backwards and forwards. Most Indians who've been to college know Shakespeare backwards and forwards. We've seen all the Shakespeare plays, so there's nothing that's alien. It wasn't alien to me. The weather was cold. At the first, I liked it. Then I didn't like it so much. I loved the chocolates. I loved all kinds of things that I wanted in England that were there. Smog, I was not prepared for, but I got used to it. So I arrived in England fully expecting all the things that were there. I had pictures of the streets in my head. And
interestingly enough, I like the way you describe roots, and you talk about some people are basically national trees, that their roots stay where they grew up,
yeah.
And you consider yourself an international tree. Explain that.
Right. Well, I'm very Indian, and I think that's because of that very close upbringing that was sort of really at heart Hindu, but had a lovely layering of Islamic culture. So that's my background, and that is my roots. And they were so deep and secure that will never go away. So I can be taken anywhere, and my head will be spinning in that other world, but my roots will always be totally, totally Indian.
Now, interestingly enough, it was that time you described, you wrote to your mother, learned those recipes, and started to cook. And it was because of your award-winning performance in the 1965 Shakespeare Wala,
yes,
that you were noticed and considered the actress who could cook.
Yes.
And then the BBC basically offered you a series. Tell me how that all developed and how you tackled it.
Well, the thing was that I was in England, and then I went to America to act. My Marlon Brando was my hero, and I wanted to be another Marlon Brando. And I thought, what is there to this? I'm going to go there, study acting more. And I went to the Actors Studio when I came to New York. I did all the things that Marlon Brando had done. But I wouldn't get work because I looked like me and talked like me. And I wasn't getting work. And every time I went to see a great director, they would say, well, we are seeing where we can place you. And that meant stand at the back of the line and, if you find something. And the only jobs I got were as an Indian. Now, how many jobs were there for an actress to play an Indian? Nothing. So I would work every other year or something in something. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. And then I said, this is ridiculous. I had little children by that time, and they had to be paid for, school had to be paid for, and there was no money. I had no money at all. So I had to do something. I started writing. And I wrote about anything that I could write about, and those were mostly the arts: music, dancing, sculpture, any of these things. And I wrote one article on food, and that was growing up in Delhi and the kind of food I'd eaten. And somehow that had a life of its own. It took off. Somebody saw it. And eventually, then I did Shakespeare Wala, the film, and got this award. And you knew Ismail Merchant, who was the producer. Now, Ismail had the ability to sell his grandmother, his little finger, whatever he wanted to sell, he could
Very
sell.
charismatic, yes.
Very charismatic. So he decided that the New York Times, here was a way to get publicity, get the New York Times to write about Madhur Jaffrey cooking. And at that time I was cooking a little, but not all that much. So he got the New York Times food writer, who was Craig Claiborne at that time, to do a huge one-page article on this actress who cooks. And then I got approached by an editor who said, "Will you like to write an Indian cookbook?" And that's how it all started. I didn't decide that. It all somehow fell like rain from the sky.
Now, you were a sort of relatively early pioneer, as you were saying, in Western movies as an Indian, because until that time there weren't really the roles. To what degree do you regret the fact that your acting career, which is what you went for, the Marlon Brando, if you like, the second Marlon Brando, never really materialized, because it seems that you were distracted or went down other paths?
Well, what happened was that I wasn't getting any acting work, and then I did the BBC series, which was very successful, a cookery series, and I began to get acting work as well. So, once you are known in one area, then they offer you children's books. I'd written a children's book that I wasn't able to sell before. And suddenly somebody said, "We'll take a children's book from you." And I said, "I happen to have one sitting around."
What I prepared earlier.
Yes. So, just the career then went in a double direction. And what really sustained me financially, because I still didn't have any money, were the books, because they sold very well and they became bestsellers, and that allowed me to act for very little money, which I often did.
Well, what do you think it is about the way you deliver the idea of cooking, the way you have presented cooking, Indian cooking, to the Western world that works so well? Why is it that people
I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you why other people who are also excellent cooks, or better, first of all, you have to know how to write. And this is what I studied. I'm a writer. I can write. So you know how to put ideas across that have a beginning, middle, and end, that have a story, that can hold a person. And then cooking on television sells books. And I'm an actress. The first time I had to audition for the BBC, they gave me nothing. I was in a radio studio in London for my first cooking audition, and they said, "Pretend that you're cooking a dish."
And you only had a microphone.
And I only had a microphone and a counter in front of me. Just pretend. They gave me no fire, no plates, no nothing. So I said, "Okay, all right." So I just went from one end of the counter to another, pretending I'm roasting cumin, I'm grinding cumin, I'm taking yogurt, I'm whipping it up and putting the spices in and putting cucumber in. I just went from one end to the other. The whole thing was pretend. And they were very impressed, and I was hired practically on the spot. And I think it's the actor's ability to stay calm, to talk to someone, to talk directly to someone, and to hold their attention.
Plus, you have the benefit of having lived on 3 continents.
Yes.
India, Europe, or effectively Britain, I guess, and America as well. How do you compare your life across the 3? What have they added to the color and the recipe of Madhur Jaffrey's life?
Well, I think India has to do with all my emotional sustenance. England has a lot to do with my intellectual development, I think. And America is the big, baudy, fun place.
The adventure.
That gave me that really catered to my spirit of adventure. Yeah.
Now, if you look back, reflect on all the things you've done now, is there anything that stood out that you've wanted to do you haven't had a chance to achieve yet?
Well, I'd certainly like to do more acting. Certainly like both on the stage. I'd like to do all the Shakespearean classics, which I did as a kid, but I'd like to do them as an adult. I'd like to, I think this would be it really, and maybe write a novel, which I'm working on.
Well, Madhur Jaffrey, such a pleasure. So many things to talk about, and we always never have enough time with this kind of story.
Oh, thank you.
I wish you a long life. Thank you very much.
Thank you.